Welcome back. I'm Peter St. Onge. This is a weekly roundup of my daily videos on the economy and freedom, where I cut through the BS and lay out what the gaslighting clowns pulled out of their hats this week and what is coming next. Republicans are finally realizing Americans are pissed off about inflation, and if Republicans don't fix it, next year they will hand Democrats Congress and stonewall the rest of Trump's term on everything outside executive orders. Last week's elections in New York, Virginia, and New Jersey were a shock to Republicans who had been gleefully writing obituaries for the Democrat Party. Now, all of those are blue, but Democrats did a lot better than expected, and the reason was inflation. The Red Apple's new communist mayor summed it up in his victory speech, coming back over and over to the issue that delivered him victory: a city we can afford. In fact, inflation was consistently a top issue in the 2024 election, neck and neck with our gaping wound of a southern border. While Republicans, Trump, have done amazing on the border, even Republican voters are turning on inflation. It's now the weakest issue for Republicans and Trump nationwide. Now, a lot of New York's costs are the precise policy Zoran wants, so rent control, restrictive zoning, union and environmental mandates, occupational licenses, and extortionate taxes that kill jobs. But the wider problem is affordability nationwide. Trump slowed inflation, so Biden's final 12 months were 3% on CPI, while Trump is doing 2.5% since he took office, but slightly better than Biden ain't cutting it 12 months in. Especially considering that during the election, Trump promised to, quote, end inflation immediately. He promised to reduce energy and electricity by half in 12 months, including $2 gas, and to cut the price of a new home also in half. So even allowing for Trump's style, in fact, gas prices are down barely a nickel, they're 3 and change. Houses are down 0.5%. So why so little progress? Congress. They were handed the inflation fix on a silver platter by Doge, including massive spending cuts. Elon wanted $2 trillion per year, which would have cut prices by 10% across the board, paired with extinction-level culling of the regulatory state that could have knocked another 15% off prices, starting with healthcare, housing, energy, and groceries, and a radical expansion of drilling that could have dropped energy prices down into the twos. Now, Republicans in Congress instead dropped every ball. Doge cuts went from trillions to billions to spending hikes. They've done almost nothing on regulations, leaving voters to the wolves of Obamacare, the USDA food cartel, and green energy unicorn farts. Having missed their window, now they're up against a Federal Reserve that has turned inflationary, slashing rates, and gutting the balance sheet sell-off, quantitative tightening, that had ended Biden inflation in the first place. So as next, Congress's dereliction is putting the entire inflation fight on Trump, and he's only got so many tools. Deportations are helping rents and cars, but that is canceled by higher wages for Americans, which is a good thing, but not for inflation. Energy is finally starting to drill, but it is all being gobbled up by AI data centers. And Trump's investment boom, much of it strong-armed in trade deals, will be amazing for jobs, but will also pump inflation as trillions flood in. Americans are angry about prices. If Republicans don't man up on spending and regulation by midterms, 51% will vote for the guy who's giving it to them for free. Donald Trump is cutting off migrants who go on welfare, especially the fat ones, raising the surreal prospect that migrants could actually pay for their own health care, even their own groceries. Last week, the State Department announced it will be enforcing the century-old public charge laws that deny visas and entry to people who are likely to rely on public benefits, including welfare, housing, or Medicare provided free by taxpayers. The rules had been ignored by Biden's handlers so they could replace American voters with third-worlders, and they're a major reason why almost 4 in 10 migrants do not bother working. The rule would deny entry to anybody who has ever used government cash assistance, SNAP, WIC, Medicaid, or who's ever been institutionalized or in a nursing home. That could hit up to 6 in 10 non-citizen households, including so-called mixed-status households, where the anchor baby unleashes a flood of benefits. fact, a separate study found 36% of non-citizens have used SNAP, 37% have used Medicaid, 22% literally collect cash payments, TANF. And all the Center for Immigration Statistics estimates almost two-thirds of non-citizen households have taken taxpayer money. Note, the real number could be much higher. Illegals have every reason to hide their status, as do the left-wing bureaucrats who import them. Now, beyond the grifters, the rule requires a medical report that would exclude anybody with major health issues that could burden taxpayers. So no more Guatemalans parachuting in for free dialysis or million-dollar transplants. Conditions include diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, which 1 in 3 Mexicans have. It includes obese migrants who, after all, are very likely to consume tax-funded healthcare resources, along with anybody with mental health conditions or drug addiction, which seems long overdue. Worth pausing to note that billions of people want to move to the U.S., meaning we could cherry-pick the very best, the best 1 in 1,000, the Elons, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers, the Japanese Nobel physicists. Instead, we take millions of dregs so Democrats can recruit new voters. Now, all this matters because American taxpayers currently waste almost $200 billion a year on migrants, according to the Heritage Foundation, when we could be turning a massive profit from cherry-picking the best. I recently mentioned a European study that found migrants from Western countries or Japan generate $500,000 in net benefits per migrant, while those from the third world consume $500,000 or more per person. So as next, the new rule is being implemented by the famously left-wing State Department, so it will take eagle eyes to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to. But the big payoff would be reviewing the 13 million green card holders whose permanent residency should also be subject to public charge rules. After all, it's a privilege to come to this country. If you can't hack it, go home. Trump needs Congress to do this. He can only do new entrants. And given green cards convert to citizens at $70,000 per month, the clock is ticking. So it's a great start from Trump, but Congress needs to finish the job. A word from our sponsor. If you own gold, and many of you do, you already understand how it protects your wealth from the insanity coming out of Washington. The inflation, the recessions, the wars. But with monetary metals, there's a way to actually earn a yield of up to 4% on your gold paid in more ounces of gold. You retain ownership of real, allocated physical gold with no storage costs while your ounces grow every month outside the banking system. If you're serious about protecting your future and building your legacy, head to monetarymetals.com/Peter to get started. Now back to our show. A new, quote, bombshell report finds billions of dollars went from European charities to fund American protests, ranging from BLM riots to climate and immigration protests, also mostly peaceful, to the marches against Trump's crime crackdown just last month. Who needs hostile regimes funding riots when Europeans do it for free? The numbers come from Americans for Public Trust and finds nearly $2 billion came from charities based in Britain, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Switzerland, including one generously funded program that, quote, educates judges about climate change, and millions from the UK-based Children's Investment Fund for BLM riots, because who would fund the riots if not the children? The money is laundered through American pass-throughs to dodge so-called FARA laws against foreign influence, while allowing them to pass the money to unsavory recipients, including Democrat political campaigns, lobbying, and referendum campaigns. So it is a shell game that burns American cities and buys elections for Democrats. Now, a lot of the money is effectively seed capital that then goes to lobby additional grants from American taxpayers, force multiplying the climate lawsuits and educating judges. Keep in mind, this is just the billions APT found. The bad guys are very good at accounting and lawyers. There's probably a lot more in dark money networks. Of course, it's not just European billionaires trying to topple our government and cripple our economy. Both Russia and China pour government money into American left-wing activism. For decades, Russia funded climate activism in the U.S. and Europe to cripple competition with Russia's energy exports. Now, with the bonus of sapping the West's ability to fund the Ukraine war, China has spent billions bribing American universities and think tanks to talk up the Chinese miracle, to carry China's policy water, and to attack Trump. This comes to at least $5.5 billion China injected into American universities, both to buy friends and to steal intellectual property that was paid for by American taxpayers. Intellectual property theft, the U.S. Trade Representative estimates cost us $600 billion per year. So as next, one of the biggest achievements of Elon's Doge was revealing that nearly the entire left is made up of paid astroturf, funded by government bureaucrats who are congenitally sympathetic to socialism since they would be in charge, and funded apparently by foreign left-wing billionaires. Trump's already going after domestic funders of violent left-wing protests. The next step is going after foreigners and governments trying to buy American politics, cripple our economy, and destabilize our society. New data says millions of Americans are struggling even as GDP soars. Are we becoming a two-speed economy with party at the top, misery at the bottom? The past couple weeks showed spreading pain among low-income and even middle-class Americans. One study found foreclosures jumped 20% year-on-year after a decade laying dormant. Car loan delinquencies are up 50% this year. In fact, 60-day late car payments hit a record high, worse than 2008. Repossessions hit 1.7 million, also worse than the 2008 crisis. Another study found 68% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. That's up 10 points in the last 18 months. 43% of them have trouble paying their monthly bills. Combined with recent jobs weakness, it's painting a picture of essentially three Americas. A rich quarter who's doing fantastic, a middle half who's running down assets and starting to miss payments, and a bottom quarter who's close to going under. Now, this pattern did not start yesterday. In fact, it's the theme of Joe Biden's 4 long years where we got a so-called K-shaped economy with the rich soaring to new heights while everybody else treads water or sinks. To illustrate, a study by Moody's found the top 10% of households now account for 49.2% of spending. That's up almost 5 points since COVID. Interestingly, the bottom quarter also rose since COVID thanks to trillions dumped into welfare and social spending using COVID as excuse. To illustrate, SNAP alone grew almost 70% since COVID. In other words, the middle class is getting squeezed on both ends. Now, help is on the way. According to the Atlanta Fed, GDP right now is growing at a blistering 4%, led by trillions of investment flooding into reshoring production and, of course, AI data centers. Meanwhile, mass deportations and departures are already 2 million plus, which is driving down rents and used car prices. Rents are currently falling at 4% annualized, all while blue-collar wages just hit the highest growth in 65 years. Still, Biden left a deep hole, and Trump's made back barely a quarter of the loss in real incomes. Moreover, those trillions of COVID benefits and stimmies reset spending levels for a lot of lower middle-class households. They got used to spending more than they make and are now losing their cars and apparently their houses. So as next, we've got two big growth engines coming, Fed cuts and those trillions of investment. Every single point of Fed cut is worth roundabout 1 million jobs, while every trillion of investment is also worth 1 million jobs. The problem, of course, is it all takes time. The Fed is looking at 0.75 of a point cut the next year, while that tsunami of foreign investment will take years to go from planning to blueprints to construction to operation. Meanwhile, if AI job losses ramp up, it could gobble those millions of jobs as fast as they're born. If that happens, and jobs are still sluggish by midterms, voters may take it out on Republicans and see if socialism works this time. A word from our sponsor. One of the best ways to secure your Bitcoin is with a hardware wallet, a physical device that lets you keep your coins offline without internet connection. One of the most trusted names in hardware wallets is CoinKite, maker of the famous block clock. CoinKite devices are made in Canada. They're run by passionate Bitcoiners who've been at this since 2012, back when Bitcoiners were trading in person at swap meets. You can pick up hardware wallets and plenty of other goodies at coinkite.com/ProfSaintAnge. That's CoinKite.com/ProfSaintAnge. Okay, back to our show. the Federal Reserve just turned inflationary. If you like your inflation, you can keep it. In fact, you'll love what comes next. While the government shutdown hogged the headlines on October 29th, the Fed quietly announced they are ending the main program fighting inflation, called quantitative tightening, or QT. This matters because QT, which involves selling trillions in Fed assets and canceling the dollars, was the main tool the Fed was using to keep the lid on inflation. Now it is over. So the Fed has two main ways to create inflation. The traditional way is they artificially lower interest rates so banks can make lots of cheap loans. The banks literally print the money, which is why when you get a mortgage, the bank wants you to open an account. You might think, I don't want an account, I want a loan. But the reason is the bank effectively printed the money. The new money then dilutes existing dollars just like a basement counterfeiter, and prices go up. But the Fed started a second way to inflate in the 2008 crisis, where the Fed literally types a bunch of zeros on a spreadsheet, calls them dollars, and uses them to buy everything in sight. Called quantitative easing, or QE, this is fun because it bails out Wall Street, it stimulates the economy into a tissue fire, and it creates inflation. Now, QE is the basement counterfeiter on turbo. In 2008, they printed over $1 trillion in just 2 months. During COVID, they QE'd $3 trillion in 2 months before going on to QE a cool $5 trillion. That was fully 1/3 of all dollars in existence, and of course it set inflation soaring at the fastest pace since the 1970s. Now, Biden inflation scared the Fed straight, so they jacked interest rates to choke off those loans, and they flipped to tightening, selling everything in sight and canceling the dollars. They started with a whopping $95 billion a month, which broke Biden inflation, taking official CPI from 8%, probably 10%, to just over 3%. At that point, they backed off because the sales were hurting Wall Street, dropping to $60 billion a month by the time Biden left office, $40 billion this April, and now zero. The problem is Congress has not cut spending, it actually increased, meaning the Fed is now taking away the main thing holding down inflation, while they're also cutting interest rates, which also makes inflation go up. All while Congress parties on and Trump brings trillions of investment for reshoring production in the ever-popular AI data centers. These are great for jobs, but they also bid up prices. So it's the perfect storm for inflation, and the Fed just tapped out. Now, we're not going back to 8% inflation. That would take another COVID-level printing orgy, but inflation could pop back into the 3s by midterms when voters get to tell Congress what they think about it all. So as next, the easy way to cut inflation is cut federal spending and regulatory red tape so the money shrinks and the production and competition grows. Given Congress is not doing any of this, the hope was at least the Fed keeps QT going to drain the extra inflation. That ship has now sailed. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and go to petersanons.com for daily videos and in-depth articles with charts and all the gory details. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.